A deep chill had fallen over the half-finished towers of Hogwarts. A chill that had nothing to do with the Scottish wind dot in the center of what would become the Great Hall. A single enchanted flame flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. Around it stood the four greatest witches and wizards of the age. The founders, but they were not united. Salazar Slytherin, his voice a cold whisper, pointed a long finger towards the dark, looming forest. The world outside is filled with suspicion and hatred, Godric. We must not, allow their impure blood to stain these sacred walls. Helga Hufflepuff, her expression kind but firm, shook her head. All who seek to learn are welcome here, Salazar. That was our promise, all. Rowena Ravenclaw, her gaze distant, was looking at a magical, glowing blueprint of the castle, lost in thought. Our challenge is not blood, she said, her voice like the turning of a page, but a mind. How do we measure the worth of a student's potential? Godric Gryffindor, silent until now, slammed his fist on the rough wooden table. Worth is measured in the heart, in courage, in action. The four stood in a tense deadlock. Four brilliant minds, four powerful ideals, pulling the very soul of the castle in different directions. Salazar Slytherin summoned his familiar, a great silver serpent that coiled around his arm, its eyes glowing with cold intelligence. In response, a magnificent golden lion, made of pure light, appeared behind Gryffindor, a silent roar echoing in the magical air. A badger, loyal and steadfast, burrowed at Hufflepuff's feet, its form glowing with an earthy, warm light, and an eagle of bronze soared above Ravenclaw's head, its sharp eyes surveying the conflict. Their very magic was at war. Godric looked at his friends, his rivals, and a deep sadness touched his heart. He saw the first cracks in their legendary friendship. He saw a future where their squabbles could tear the school apart. A future where, after they were gone, no one would know how to sort the children. Who would decide who was brave, who was cunning, who was loyal, who was wise? In that moment of desperate clarity, he knew they couldn't leave this monumental task to chance, or to a flawed human judge. They needed a vessel, something impartial, something eternal, something that could hold a piece of each of them. His gaze fell upon the worn, pointed wizard's hat resting on his own head, a simple object that had been with him in 100 battles. An idea, as brave and as bold as the man himself, began to form. A secret that would become the living soul of Hogwarts. He held the simple leather hat in his hands, a witness to his past, and now the vessel for their future. We will each give it a part of our own mind, he declared, a mind that will know how to find the brave. His hand, holding the hat, began to glow with a powerful, crimson light. Salazar Slytherin stepped forward, a calculating look in his eyes. And the cunning, those of pure ambition. He touched the hat, and a sinister, emerald green energy flowed into it. It must also value the loyal, Helga Hufflepuff added, her voice warm as the earth. She placed her gentle hand on the hat, and a soft, golden yellow light pulsed from her touch. Double quotes. And never forget those of wit and learning, Rowena Ravenclaw concluded, her touch adding a final, brilliant, sapphire blue glow. The four streams of magical energy, red, green, yellow, and blue, swirled together, weaving into the very fabric of the old hat. The hat began to levitate, suspended in the swirling vortex of their combined power. Its form twisted and turned, seams stitching themselves with threads of pure light. A mouth appeared in the folds of the fabric, a silent O of new consciousness. It was being born. And for the first time, a voice, not belonging to any of the four, echoed not in the air, but in their minds. a voice ancient and new, pieced together from their own thoughts and ideals. Their work was done. The Sorting Hat was alive, a silent guardian, a keeper of their legacy, created to ensure that Hogwarts would forever have a heart, even when its founders were but a memory. And so, in the heart of the unfinished castle, in a moment born of both conflict and a desperate hope for unity, the Sorting Hat drew its first silent breath. It was more than a mere enchanted object. It was a vessel, a living library, holding a precious fragment of the 4 greatest magical minds of the age. Their work, they believed, was complete. The future of their school, the delicate task of guiding young souls, was now secure in the silent wisdom of the bewitched fabric dot in the early years that followed. Before the grand doors of Hogwarts were even open to the first generation of students, the hat served as a silent counselor. The 4 founders, in their rare moments of quiet contemplation, would retreat to the chamber where it rested. They would not speak to it as one might speak to a person, but rather, they would think at it. They would project their questions, their doubts, their hopes for the school, and the hat would respond not in words, but in a chorus of pure thought, echoing directly into their minds. When Rowena Ravenclaw wrestled with the curriculum for ancient runes, she would feel the hat offer a perspective of Gryffindor's practicality, suggesting that the symbols should be taught not just as theory, but for their use in warding and protection. When Helga Hufflepuff designed the layout of the greenhouses, struggling with how to cultivate the temperamental screaming mandrakes, she felt a flicker of Slytherin's cunning, a suggestion to use silencing charms woven into the very glass of the ceiling, a solution both elegant and ingenious. The hat was their point of unity, a constant reminder of their shared dream. It was a chorus of their best selves. But even within that chorus, one voice began to sound a note of dissonance, a low, persistent hum of discord. The fragment of Salazar Slytherin's mind, a piece of a soul already turning toward shadow, was growing restless. He had agreed to the hat's creation, yes, but he had seen it as a tool, a magnificent, powerful tool for classification. For him, the world was becoming a more dangerous place. He would travel into the Muggle villages that huddled in the valleys below the castle and return with stories of fear and suspicion. He spoke of witch hunts, of whispered accusations, of the growing chasm between the magical and the mundane. His fear, though born of a fierce desire to protect magic, was beginning to curdle into prejudice. He saw the Muggle-born children, these unexpected blossoms of magic from non-magical families, not as a miracle, but as a gateway, a vulnerability, a bridge between their pristine magical world and a world that hated and feared them. The arguments began in private, in hushed, urgent tones, behind the heavy oak doors of their meeting chamber. Salazar, his voice a silken, persuasive whisper, would plead his case. "We are guardians," he would argue, his dark eyes fixed on Godric. "We are shepherding a sacred gift. To invite those of common blood into these halls is to invite the fox into the henhouse. They do not understand our ways. They do not respect our history. Their loyalty will always be divided. Their loyalty lies where their heart is, Salazar." Godric's voice, in contrast, would boom with a frustrated passion. "And their magic is as pure as any. Have you seen the raw power in young Elara, the baker's daughter? She has more magical talent in her little finger than half the pompous purebloods I have met at the ministry. Courage is not a matter of bloodline." Helga Hufflepuff, ever the peacemaker, would try to breach the divide. There must be a way to welcome all, but to teach them our values of secrecy and safety. We can build trust. The Sorting Hat itself will find the loyal and the true, regardless of who their parents were. But Salazar's fear had taken root too deep. He began to see his fellow founders not as allies, but as idealists, blind to the harsh realities of the world. He started spending more time alone, delving into darker, more potent forms of magic, seeking power not for knowledge, but for control. He fortified the dungeons, claiming it was for the school's protection, but in reality, he was carving out a domain that was solely his, steeped in the magic of shadows and secrecy. The other founders felt him slipping away. His presence at their council meetings grew colder, his arguments sharper, his silence more menacing. The harmony that had once defined their great project was replaced by a constant, low-level tension, the feeling of a storm gathering just over the horizon, the breaking point. The final, irreparable fissure in their friendship came on the eve of the school's grand opening. They had gathered to perform the final enchantments that would seal the wards of Hogwarts forever. Salazar arrived late. He did not look at the intricate magical matrix they had woven. His eyes were fixed on the sorting hat, which rested on its pedestal in the corner. "Before we seal this castle," he said, his voice void of any warmth, "I have one final proposal, a final safeguard." He outlined his plan with cold precision. He wished to add a new layer of enchantment to the hat, a master charm of his own design that would allow it to detect the purity of a student's bloodline. This charm would give the hat a new, primary directive to ensure that any student not of pure magical ancestry would be barred from entering his house. Slytherin forever. A stunned silence fell over the room. It was one thing to argue philosophy. It was another to propose corrupting their single greatest creation with pure prejudice. Godric was the first to speak, his voice trembling with a barely controlled rage. "You would poison it, Salazar? You would take our symbol of unity and turn it into a tool of division? You would carve your bigotry into the very soul of this school? I would protect it." Slytherin hissed back, his aristocratic composure finally cracking. "While you dream of a world of acceptance, I see the world as it is. I will not have my house, my legacy, diluted by the weak and the unworthy." Rowena Ravenclaw, who had been silent, finally spoke, her voice as cold and clear as ice. "What you call strength, Salazar, is merely fear, and fear is the death of wisdom. We will not allow it." The lines were drawn. There was no room for compromise. Salazar Slytherin looked at the three of them, his friends, his partners, and saw not allies, but obstacles. His dream for Hogwarts was no longer their dream. "So be it," he whispered, his voice so quiet it was more chilling than any shout. "If you will not safeguard the future of magic... then I must make my own provisions." Without another word, he turned his back on them and walked towards the shadows of the corridor. It was not just a departure from the room. It was a departure from everything they had built together. The great fellowship of the four founders was broken. And as the sound of his footsteps faded into the stone, a cold and lonely wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing half the candles in a single mournful puff. The departure of Salazar Slytherin left a scar on the very soul of Hogwarts. The remaining three founders were heartbroken, but they were not broken. They sealed the castle's wards and opened its gates, and for 1,000 years, their dream, though fractured, endured. The Sorting Hat, now carrying the silent echo of their great schism, performed its duty flawlessly. Every year, it sat upon the heads of nervous 11-year-olds and peered into the depths of their character. It sang its cryptic songs, sometimes joyful, sometimes filled with somber warnings about the need for unity. A plea from the past that few truly understood. It became a beloved, if slightly intimidating, tradition, its dramatic origins fading from memory into mere legend. The hat, as a living repository of the founders' minds, did more than just sort. It learned. It grew from every mind it touched. It gathered a new perspective. It absorbed a millennium of hopes, anxieties, and choices. It learned that true courage was not the absence of fear, but acting in spite of it. It learned that ambition, when tempered with loyalty, could be a great force for good. It saw that loyalty without discernment could be a weakness, and that wisdom without compassion was hollow. The simple definitions of the founders expanded, becoming richer, more nuanced. The hat learned about the boundless complexity of the human spirit. It understood, perhaps better than anyone, that the lines between the houses were not walls, but permeable, shimmering curtains. And yet, it held one final secret close. A secret that not even Helga or Rowena knew. A private pact made between the two greatest rivals, the two closest friends, Godric and Salazar, dot in the days before the final argument. When Godric first felt the chill of Salazar's changing heart, he had confronted him alone. He knew Slytherin was delving into dark arts, and though he didn't know the full extent of his plans, he sensed that Salazar was building a legacy of his own within the castle. Fearing a future where the school might be threatened from within, Godric devised a final safeguard. He knew that any true threat born of Slytherin's lineage would be met with cunning and power. A student facing such a threat would need more than just a house to belong to. They would need a weapon. Godric went to the Sorting Hat alone, late one night. He held his most prized possession, his goblin-wrought sword, and performed a final complex piece of soul magic. He did not enchant the hat to produce the sword. That would be too simple, too crude. Instead, he wove the essence of the sword into the hat's being, linking the artifact's magic directly to his own consciousness, held within the fabric. The hat would not be a container, but a conduit, a gate. The conditions were absolute. The sword would not appear for just any Gryffindor. It would not come for pride or for glory. It would answer the call only in a moment of mortal peril, for a student who demonstrated a level of selfless courage and loyalty to the school itself that mirrored Godric's own founding ideals. It was a pact between the founder, the hat, and the very spirit of the castle, a hidden trump card in an ancient, ongoing game of ideals, a secret that lay dormant for 1,000 years, waiting for an heir worthy not of Slytherin's blood, but of Gryffindor's heart.